Okay, so this is our last session, and it's basically a community discussion. It was as we advertised, we want opinions on what a future version of the CAPEC program should be. We've discussed a lot of different things in these past 5 sessions about what's in CAPEC, what we're looking to improve upon, what we're looking to expand, and Alec is gonna talk about that, and hopefully um, we'll have a good discussion after he presents his slides. Alec, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. And honestly, yeah, this is going to be our final session. But as we start, I do want to say that it's been a long day of wonderful things that we have heard so far. And I do hope that we can get some more feedback as we go through these things, because at the end of the day, this is sort of a wrap up. That's my intent with this. Talking a little bit about where the program was, some of our intent around what we're doing now. Perhaps reflect on some of the things that we heard as well as we wrap for the day, just to capture your final thoughts and feedback. If you haven't been able to share, I do encourage everybody to reach out. We have a lot of people online that haven't spoken yet, so if you're able to put in something in the chat or just raise your hand, and otherwise look forward to it. So I did want to just start here. As Bob, it's really serendipitous to have Bob lead into my session too, because I wanted to start talking about the origin of CAPEC, right? And it's actually very similar to CWE and Timeline as sort of offshoots of the CVE program, which predated both of them by a certain number of years. But in looking back at what the purpose of it, and funny enough, I should say, I have a little note in my calendar that we're coming up on the 15th anniversary of CAPEC to the month, I think, coming up next week or so. But in terms of the idea behind it, right, just as with CVE and CWE, the idea of formalizing attack patterns in a way that provides a common language to contribute to the development and maintenance of cyber-enabled capabilities. So within CWE side of things, if we have a common understanding of how we can define weaknesses, right, or the mistakes that are made at the time, at least by a software developer or architect, and now, of course, we are enumerating weaknesses that are made in the hardware design stage and phase two. Similarly, if we have a established common language for the attack patterns, that can only help the industry as a whole. So we're all talking about trying to make sure we're all speaking the same language as we try and address the challenging problems that we face. At the time, the previous, over time, I guess at the launch, if you look back at the history of the program, that's still up on the site with regards to the history and where it started. I've put a list here that came directly from that, which is talking about the use cases. And as I mentioned before, and there's been some chat in the chat about the user experience working group, we're really looking at the different use cases where CAPEC is being used by the community, right? So we have heard from many in there that align to some of these things that we had at the origin of the program. But just looking at the list now, from training and defining requirements and design and threat modeling, verification, and the process of the release of a product, such that from design, through verification and release, is really where we started. So Bob, I think we can go to the next slide too. And from there, what we're seeing is, since 2007, we went from CAPEC version 1 to the upcoming version 3.7, which carried over a number of changes, as you can imagine, not only growing the corpus of information related to various attacks, but expanding the schema. So we had new elements, right? The talk that Steve Christie-Coley gave earlier today, talking about the different elements and values within CAPEC entries, and we talk about the prioritization of how important those are for different user personas and their user scenarios or things. In addition, we also expanded into new domains of attack patterns. The rise of mobile, came pretty soon after, I guess, the launch of CAPEC 2, and that was, of course, something we covered. And things like physical security and supply chain and social engineering were new topics for CAPEC that we started to enumerate in a common language of attack patterns. And since that, we've also seen broadening support across other information corpuses. Of course, we've made great strides on the CWE mapping front, as well as other information corpuses that you may be familiar with, like STIX and ATT&CK, and we continue to do that, right? All of these corpuses, certainly the first and the former and latter, update fairly frequently. There's new information therein all the time, and so the team is working to do that to provide value for our various users such that they can connect to the information they need in an actionable manner. Next slide, Bob. But today, we really heard a tremendous amount of great stories and use cases, and also tremendous benefit I felt from hearing from some great thought leaders behind a number of domains, right? In the area of education, I thought it was fascinating to hear from our esteemed colleagues over in academia talking about how CAPEC can be used to teach about secure software development. We heard about the challenges in penetration testing community and how information within CAPEC can be leveraged such to keep track not only and understand about different ways of doing penetration testing, but also, you know, capturing data and performing those processes in a formalized way, depending on the context of what you're looking at. We also heard from some thought leaders behind hardware security and how CAPEC provides value there, and how there's more to offer too. And then, of course, most recently, we heard from Bob about supply chain. And I'm just noticing now we've got hardware there twice. I'm not sure how that happened, but this slide has a little bump. So bumps in the road. What I will say is across all of these things and throughout today, and as we go forward in this talk, as I wrap up sort of our reflection, is just that while there has been a tremendous amount of growth over time, you know, looking back at where we started and some of the things that have been going on over the last few years, and also what we're hearing going on right now today, there is so much to do in terms of ensuring that what we are doing as a program is of value to the community. We heard many conversations about how, you know, certain things are valuable in terms of these different domains. Specifically as to the state that they are in now. We've also heard, you know, how can we better perhaps, you know, delineate between software and firmware and hardware and things like these that are capabilities not only to changing the content that we have or adding some sort of value therein to how it's presented, but we also heard comments about, you know, different areas, you know, looking at the values that are presented in the polling that we did that say, you know, this area is really important to us, and that helps us think about how we want to make sure that we sort of focus some of our team's efforts and focus our community engagement. I've been trying to answer as many as I can in the chat as they come, but there's also been many emails I think that have been coming in throughout the day. We are always looking for more you know, voices from the community to engage with us and help us modernize these programs such that they can bring value to the community. And so I encourage all of you on this call, if you haven't had a chance and you have interest, to please reach out in that way. But yeah, so I did want to just recap that. We can go to the next slide, Bob. And as we reflect, I did want to just open this up if there's a little bit of energy left. I know it's been a long day. But we have many people on the call. We have many people in the chat. If you're unwilling or unable to speak, to provide some comments, I have a series of questions here that I just wanted to pose and really open up conversation for all. I do realize it's been a long day for this, but as we look forward, right, and we reflect on what we've heard, we heard about where the program was. We heard a lot about what people are doing now in various domains. In your opinion, and there's probably a lot of opinions here, but I'll just say this question openly, and it's very open-ended. We can focus different ways, but what should the CAPEC program prioritize as it aims to modernize the program for its community user base? This is something that I think there is no wrong answer for, because everybody here has an interest and has, of course, something in the game to provide value, because the community members that use CAPEC are those who we are serving. And so on that front, I will open it up to the community. I know there's chats people, so hopefully someone on my team can jump in and point things out to me. I've got a lot of screens open. Thank you, Rich. But I will say it looked like Joe turned his camera on. Should we start with Joe?
Joe put his hand up, so he should go first.
Joe, you're muted. You're muted, my friend. I can see you.
Yeah. Just saying, it was a great session today. And we noticed that some of the priorities were talking about mitigations. And you also talked about the mapping, between CAPEC and CWE. And certainly CWE represents the attack vectors. That's how the attacks take place. And so one of the first things when we talk about mitigating attacks, it's like, how about hardening the attack surface? So one of the priorities when we talk about mitigations, it should be go fix that CWE, mitigate it. That should be part of the going in answer for every one of the CAPEC mitigations. But just keeping that in mind. By the way, and so where you said hardware and you thought you said it twice, it should have been cyber physical systems. And because we're seeing the chained attacks, so software and hardware, so that would be the replacement line for one of your hardware lines.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Joe. It wouldn't be a presentation without some sort of slip up on a bullet. That's how it always goes.
Yeah, or also just basic physical security, which is a domain of CAPEC. So I think that's what you were headed, but Joe also had a good point.
Thanks, Joe.
There is a comment in the chat by Murthy. Provide more training material, special bridge firmware and software with security as a focus topic.
That's fantastic. So yeah, thank you for that comment. This is something that I think we've heard before too, and this is a great point on which to reflect as we look forward. We have done a little bit of guidance material and sort of looking at, if I may sort of, correlate the similar terms, guidance and training and education. I think we have a lot of users, especially today, Dr. Susanna and Akand, who were able to join us. I think there's really an opportunity for our community to help us do this better too. We've done a little bit of, just one anecdote. We have done some training material or guidance material over the last year. We released back, I think in February of last year, guidance material around mapping vulnerabilities, so CVEs to CWEs, and how to help people identify the root cause weaknesses associated with the CVE more directly. And so that effort I thought was really valuable. We were already seeing evidence of that being really valuable, I'll say. And the great thing about it was that it was done in collaboration with many organizations, across the industry. And so I think that's an opportunity for us to also do here too. It starts to make me connect things in my mind too with regards to some of the conversations we have in the existing groups that I mentioned. You've maybe heard about throughout the day. The hardware CWE special interest group is especially interested in some way of signifying between weaknesses within CWE and CAPEC with respect to firmware, hardware, software, and how we can delineate them. And of course, in the user experience working group, that's a concern as well. So I love the comment. I think that's something we can certainly take with us from today, and certainly reach out to you, whoever submitted it, and also to everybody else on the call to help us with that. Especially, I might point to our experts in the academic field, perhaps to have something to offer there too. So thank you, Rich. Right. Anything else?
Yeah, Alec, I was just going to mention that one of the things that we've been looking into, which is where we have the contacts with academia, is trying to develop something that we could give to universities as for training in using CAPEC and CWE, et cetera. And that's something that we'd love if people on the call, several people who attended the summit, who are associated with the university. We'd love to contact you and discuss with you, sort of putting something together, sort of a joint thing that could be used in many universities.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's certainly an opportunity for that. What do we have next? Do we have any other topics before we switch the slide focus, I guess? Bob? Oh, we did switch it. That's right. It looks very similar. So as far as things we've talked about, I know we've talked about a number of things here with respect to domains, certain topics. One of the things that we also are looking at, and we would be remiss to not mention or request feedback here at this session too, is the idea of the user experience. So as I mentioned, we have a user experience working group that meets regularly. We'd love to have anybody join. It's very open forum. an opportunity to talk about various things related to these programs. But as far as those on the call today, what do you think are some of the most important things to improve or change or even to add to the CAPEC user experience? This is intended to be very open-ended. So, there is no wrong answer to any of these questions, as I said. I'm curious specifically, though, to everybody on the call, potentially that uses CAPEC or perhaps has been exploring it throughout the day and hearing different things. What are some possibilities as far as we modernize the program, perhaps, to really focus on improving or changing or adding to the user experience? Any thoughts there?
Joe, you have your hand up, but that may be from the past. Unless you have a comment that you want to make at this point. Okay,
Sorry.
I guess not.
Sorry.
Nope.
Oh, it's up from the. Wait, is it Joe? Are you ready to? Do you have another thought?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I had
No
left
problem.
it up. Sorry.
No problem. You're on the spot now, though.
Okay. One of the things that came up in the chat was maybe a discussion about the consumability of the data in CWE, CAPEC, in all of these things that we're doing. If you wanted to, discuss that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the format, I remember it might have been you, Rich, that answered that question with regards to the sort of back end structure of things. And one thing that within the CWE CAPEC board, as far as one of its responsibilities is to sort of adjudicate and sort of elect the opening of various working groups with respect to the program, topic areas. And one of the things that we've been hearing about from the community very recently, but not how can I say, also in the past, is the potential value that could be made if we were to develop a REST API, and how that information could be much easier to engage with in some regards, especially to certain users. This is something that is actively being discussed right now in terms of setting up a group to work with us to do that. So I do encourage anybody that might be interested in participating at least on that role, or sorry, on that type of project with relation to the CAPEC user experience, right, and how a REST API might be of use and particular interest to you. You can certainly reach out to us on that. But I can say at this time that yes, that is in our plans in the near future, and hopefully that work will be starting in the near future, as I say. So yeah, thanks, Rich.
Yeah, there's a comment by Jim in the chat which says, which I think you'd like to expound upon. Suggest tools and interfaces that map to users and uses. How can should cybersecurity workforce framework roles use CAPEC, CWE, and attack? And the way I read that is, you want sort of a joint interface to kind of address all of these things at the same time, which is something that we've talked about.
One information corpus to rule them all. Is that the idea, Jim? Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that, we've certainly heard that question, in terms of the different projects and how they relate, right? The most sort of low-hanging fruit, although it does take a considerable amount of resources to do it, is a mapping effort right across these different things. And that's sort of the first case usability, value add to those that are perhaps really familiar with, say, a CWE, but not necessarily MITRE ATT&CK, or vice versa, or CAPEC and attack, and how they relate. That is an interesting thought. I mean, in the old days of the program, I think people like Joe and Bob might be, remembering, these sites, and I think the site still exists, the idea of incorporating all of these information corpuses into something called making security measurable, and having a site that you could go to have these things connected in that way. I think looking forward, the opportunity to perhaps better align these things such that visually and interactively, perhaps, information could be presented away from the sort of current format of the sites themselves, in a more fluid, engaging way. And perhaps that's one way, at least if I can remember what was asked in the question, to Jim's point. with regards to the cyber workforce and how to use these different things, training around that, and guidance on how to use these to their best efforts is something that we could work with the community for, and something we've heard today as well, just in terms of some of these domains and how CAPEC is being used already accordingly, right? There's always more here. I hope I answered that question remotely.
I can add on to that. I think
sure, go ahead, Steve.
For those of you who aren't aware, the cybersecurity workforce framework is something that came out of NIST that tries to do a bunch of different things, but part of it is it tries to identify and sort of standardize on the kinds of roles and jobs that people would have within the cybersecurity industry. Things like, forensic analyst, with certain kinds of skills, things like reverse engineering and so on. So one of the ways that I interpret some of that question is, and I think it's an interesting question, an interesting proposal. There are certain roles and certain tasks within the NICE framework, NICE, for whom people who are looking at those particular roles or need to build those skills should probably be knowledgeable about CWE, CAPEC, and other of these kinds of efforts, if not, but also potentially to really use them as part of their own education. So, and one thing that this does is this ties in pretty heavily to how the U.S. government is trying to hire or trying to think about what kinds of roles and what kinds of careers they need to build for new cybersecurity people. So my take on that is it's a pretty interesting idea. Okay, good, Jim. That to me sounds like a really interesting idea to be able to tie in more closely to raise awareness of these efforts, but then also to help those kinds of people who are trying to build up their cybersecurity careers and match with what U.S. government organizations' needs are.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that. Great answer.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of comments and a lot of thumbs up for the API, and as you said, it's something that
Sure.
that working group is something we hope to set up soon, and we will send out information about that so you can join in and have have your opinions shared with people who are and try to basically have your ideas be part of the solution.
Yeah, and I would like to call out one comment because I did happen to just load up the chat. So if I may, we have a comment here related to making security measurable and actionable with mitigation suggested by phase in the supply chain. This is an interesting topic because I know that within the CAPEC team, and I'm curious what maybe others on the call might think, is an opportunity. While we mentioned we do have some supply chain coverage within CAPEC as it is, going back a long time, and it's starting to be modernized as we go forward, and there's certainly more to do, just as Bob so eloquently put in the last session 5. One thing that might be interesting is to look at where CAPEX can be sort of defined within that supply chain life cycle, right? At different stages, it's similar but different in terms of the product development life cycle, the software development life cycle. There's certain elements though of supply chain that are unique, and looking at how perhaps CAPEX that exist and those that are being written and sort of planned out, and those that we're going to get to, where they all land in that way, and perhaps presented in such a way would be valuable. I'm curious what some might think about that.
Well, what I think of when you say those words is attack surface analysis. What is the supply chain? What are the flows, both physically and temporally, and then articulate where there could be weaknesses that could be attacked. And that's where you focus the attack patterns.
Which I think, Bob, you did during some of your slides. You sort of pointed out where some of
no, that was my hint.
Right.
So forward.
Yeah.
Maybe go to the next slide.
Yeah, we can go to the, absolutely. Bob, can you switch to the next slide? Because we have another topic here. So maybe looking outside of the usability and user interface, we did ask, what are the content domains that are most important to you, which is sort of similar here. And I guess What I might ask or frame it differently is most important in terms of improving or expanding or adding. Is there a gap, right, in an entire domain that we think we don't cover that we should? We talked about some that we potentially have an opportunity to grow and expand, of course, supply chain being one, but also those that perhaps we alternatively to look at that we shouldn't necessarily focus on. I'm recalling the data that I looked at, maybe a couple hours ago with regards to what was important. I did notice that social engineering was pretty low on the list. So that's an interesting topic in and of itself, namely because in the past we've talked about, okay, the relationship between CWE and CAPEC is such that a CAPEC is, exploiting an existing weakness, and within CWE we don't enumerate, and we don't really have any plans to enumerate the weaknesses associated with social engineering, such that they start to get into neuroscience perhaps and psychology that is sort of outside of the scope of CWE, as you can imagine. So anyway, I'm open to hearing here specifically around looking at the domains that we do cover and those that are important to you. How could they be improved, or how could they be expanded or added to? So that's this question here. Any thoughts on that?
We already kind of talked about the cyber physical systems and the notion of chained attacks, where you've got both hardware and software involved with it. And you could even consider social engineering as part of that. But that is something that no single domain is going to come. So you have to bring it together into the cyber physical systems security, because we're really talking about where a cyber attack can have physical consequences. And so it's already in the news. It's going to be in the news a lot more, and this could become part of that solution space.
Yeah, thanks for that. It also reminds me, I mentioned before moments ago about these different groups that are being stood up, and one that has been approved and will be standing up very soon, for those of you on the call that might be interested, is that we are going to have an ongoing new special interest group focusing on ICS and OT systems. So be on the lookout for an invite to that. It will be, I believe, it's called the ICS. It's a acronym title extraordinaire. It's the ICS OT CWE SIG. So the Industrial Control Systems Operational Technology Common Weakness Enumeration Special Interest Group. But of course, CAPEC is going to be just as relevant in there. And so within the title, we thought maybe a few acronyms too many. But yeah, that great point. And I just wanted to plug that too, because that's coming as well for those interested in that space. I guess this is sort of similar too, but maybe a different way of thinking about it. As far as the usability of the CAPEC site, perhaps I wrote program here, but any features perhaps that, in addition to the things we talked about with regards to domains and content and the experience in certain use cases, but the actual usability, any feedback would be most welcome here. No wrong answers again. I know API was one that we've gotten a lot of positive feedback around already, but we might have hit that limit. All right. I thought we were there. If there is anything and you were scrambling for your mute button, please jump right in or add a comment. But I did just want to take this time. We are now approaching the end of our day. I realize we do have a little bit of time left, but at the same time, I do want to just say a heartfelt thank you and offer a few reminders before we do sign off. One is, firstly and foremost, I want to say thank you to all of the people who participated today, both on the call and in our panels, and all our domain area experts and thought leaders. It has been an absolutely wonderful experience to be with you, and I know that you all have tremendous demands on your time. So to share it with us on behalf of the CAPEC program, thank you very much. And I also want to say thank you to the CAPEC team, a wonderful group to put this together and to operate, behind the scenes as we're going, and of course to lead sessions and moderate. Thank you to you all. You did a wonderful job. And everybody else, thank you to all who participated and called in. It's been a wonderful session. Before we sign off, I do want to say, if you are interested in getting more involved, do consider joining one of our ongoing community groups. There's going to be more that I mentioned, but the two that exist, you can see if you just go to our landing pages for capec.miter.org or cwe.miter.org, right front and center at the bottom. There's some information about joining. And of course, the easiest way to register your interest is, of course, in the chat or an email. One thing that we will do, I think Steve Christie Coley mentioned it earlier, is that we're going to leave that field prioritization poll open. I'm going to start it after sort of this when I finish talking, I guess, because if you didn't get a chance to fill it out yet, or you really want to put some thought in, and reconsider, you can edit, of course, what you put in. But if you hadn't had a chance to go through it, you can go ahead and fill that open. We'll probably leave it in. We'll leave it open for a little bit of time today and maybe even tomorrow. So we do encourage you to reply on that. And lastly, again, I know we've had some comments on it. The videos we do intend to publish today, as far as all the sessions once they get cut down, which takes a little bit of time, but do the sessions themselves and publish them as we can. I know there's been some requests for the chat too that obviously can be shared as well. And I think the slides have been requested many times. All of these things can be shared after the fact. So I'm thrilled that you're interested in getting them, and we'll be sharing them shortly. And lastly, but not leastly, we do have many ways to contact us as always. There's the email, of course. And then if you go to all your favorite social media platforms, we are present on them. There's some handles there at the bottom for lastly. But again, thank you on behalf of the whole program. It's been a wonderful day, and thanks for spending part of your day with us. This will be the end of our discussion, and I'll turn it over to Rich for final comments. Anything, Rich?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody who I interacted with to put this together. Everybody was extremely cooperative and got all the materials, so everything went without a hitch. So I thank everybody for contributing.